Aaron Donald won Defensive Player of the Year in 2020, and I don't think anybody argues that he had better raw numbers than TJ Watt. Obviously, TJ Watt had better raw numbers, but we were able to apply some context to Donald's season. It's just harder to put up those numbers as an interior rusher than it is as an edge rusher, right? So keeping that in mind, people tended to think that Donald's season was more impressive than Watt's.
When you're rushing off the edge, not only do you have more space to work most of the time, right? More paths to go. You can win around the edge. That opens up space. That's a really long arc. That opens up space to win inside. And if you want to just go right through somebody, you get all this space, this huge runway to generate power. And, that's not a bad thing, but it's just the way that it is. That's why edge rushers always have more production than defensive tackles do, basically. When you're playing defensive tackle, you basically get no space to generate the kind of knockback you need to really just bull rush right through a guy. And you don't really get the same kind of angles around someone. You almost have to win straight through them unless you're really technically refined, quick, and reduce them to half a man, half a body right away. And that's exactly what Chris Jones has been doing all year. And of course, it's always going to be easier to get two offensive line bodies on an interior player than an exterior player, because most of the time a team's going to rush four, and every single time there's going to be 5 offensive linemen blocking, which means there's going to be a double team somewhere. Now, the tackles will basically always take the edge rushers, and there's almost always someone rushing off the edge, which devotes 3 guys to usually 2 interior players. And why would you not devote 2 guys to Chris Jones whenever you can, right? So it's going to be the case every time with a great defensive tackle. They're going to face double teams more than any other player.
And this has been the greatest season for defensive tackle play that I've ever seen in my life. Obviously, Dexter Lawrence and Quentin Williams enjoyed breakout years. Aaron Donald is still around. You've got Jonathan Allen and Kenny Clark and Christian Wilkins and Jeffrey Simmons and DeForest Buckner and all these guys, more and more and more. I mean, it's incredible the level of play that position has around the league right now.
And yet still, with all that talent around the league, Chris Jones still manages to be a total outlier with how good he is. That's what happens when the biggest and one of the most athletic defensive tackles in the entire game also becomes the most technically refined. He has gotten so good at catching linemen's arms when they punch him and just throwing them out of the way. And that obviously makes them lose all their balance. They start trying to block him with just half of their body. And at this point, they're just like a revolving door or just a normal door that swings open and lets him pass by unimpeded, basically, at that point. At some point during every rep, you have to punch, you have to engage. And he just uses that moment against you because he's gotten so good at aiming his arm and being able to catch the lineman's arm. And once he does that, he's 6'6", guys. He's 6'6". He can just lift up, and he's taller than you. And so you're just going to be off balance, and he's just going to run right through you.
These 2 clips are good examples of just how fast and chaotic everything is in the trenches. And it's just so impressive that he's always so in control and accurate when catching arms and deconstructing blocks.
And then look at this play. He's lined up at edge. On passing downs, they're not going to bother putting him inside where it's easier to double team him and, he doesn't have that runway. They'll put him at edge and watch his get off the line of scrimmage here. Watch how explosive he is, right? Instantly, he's flying forward. He's destroying 72's parallel relationship with the line of scrimmage, making him open his shoulders. Then he engages, gets right in his frame, forklifts him upwards, and then is able to chop the right hand of the tackle down, rip, bend the edge, and sack Derek Carr. I mean, this is all TJ Watt stuff in the body of a 6'6", 310-pound interior lineman. He syncs up that lower body quickness and the hand placement so well, and he just wins in a millisecond. He phases through people. Poor Luke Fortner, I mean, he's gone. He's already split the gap. And the poor guard is just trying to get some hands on him, but as soon as he extends, once again, Chris Jones just catches it, pushes him aside, arm over, he splits the gap, and he's gone. It's just unfair. Juwan Taylor, perfectly good right tackle, very good player, versus Chris Jones, once again, lined up as an edge rusher. And this is some stuff you'd expect, Nick Bosa to do. Almost Euro stepping off the line here and then getting his hands under Jawan Taylor's pads and forklifting him upwards. That's a lot of leverage. And I mean, Taylor just goes flying through the air right here. This is not the position you want to be in as an offensive tackle. And there's a lot of defensive players in the league who can get push, right? They can get in a guy's frame, push him backwards, make the quarterback nervous, and flush him out of there. Get a pressure, that's great. But what really sets Chris Jones apart is, again, how good his hands are and how good he is at disengaging from guys once he gets himself in a position to make a sack. He's able to shed the block and finish the play as well. And a really underrated part of the season for him is he was able to play 80% of the snaps for the Chiefs defense. And not every defensive tackle is able to do that and keep up that level of intensity and power. And I could make a film review just as glowing about Micah Parsons and Nick Bosa. Those two, I hold them in the highest regard as players, but they weren't quite as historic as what Chris Jones did. Only 18 defensive tackles in history have reached the 15 sack mark. Only 2 since the year 2000 have done it, and that's, of course, Aaron Donald in 2018, and now Chris Jones. Nick Bosa may have led the league in sacks this year, and I think he had the best season of any edge rusher, but there were other guys in his stratosphere. Myles Garrett, Son Reddick had a great season, Micah Parsons. But Chris Jones is also up there, and there is no defensive tackle in his stratosphere this season. In 2020, we were able to look at some of the advanced metrics like pass rush win rate and take into account how often a player was double teamed, and we were able to see, oh, Aaron Donald is just comically far above every other player at his position. He's still the best defensive player in the league. Let's give him Defensive Player of the Year. Even though there are more quality defensive tackles in the league right now than maybe ever before, Chris Jones is still leading the pack by a wide margin. And if we're going to give Aaron Donald Defensive Player of the Year in 2020 for stats like pass rush win rate and double team rate and being so comically far ahead of everyone else that, you have to give it to him. Like, if Aaron Donald wins it on that logic, why isn't Chris Jones winning it on that logic, or at least getting way more consideration on that logic, because he absolutely deserves it. And this is a little bit of a shorter video, but that's kind of all I have to say about it. If I had a vote, it would definitely go to Chris Jones. No disrespect to anyone else's season, but I think that's the most impressive that there's been on the defensive side of the ball this year.